after 13 years of pouring my heart and soul into my father-in-law's company. I turned it into an $85 million success story. But at a family dinner, my wife and her father looked at me with smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes and said, "Your wife's new husband will take over now." My chest tightened, but I forced a smile. The next morning, everything changed. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end. Let me know in the comments which city you're listening from. I'd love to see how far my story has traveled. My name is Ethan Marlowe. I'm 41 years old, and until 2 months ago, I thought I had built the perfect life. I was the CEO of Marlowe Industries, a mid-sized industrial parts company that I had transformed from a struggling family business into an $85 million empire. The company belonged to my father-in-law, Gerald Whitman, who handed me the reins 13 years ago when I married his daughter, Claire. Back then, the company was on the brink of collapse. They made decent industrial components, but the management was a disaster. Gerald was a genius with engineering, but hopeless with business. The company was 2 quarters away from bankruptcy when I walked through those factory doors for the first time as the new operations director. Claire and I had met at a charity gala in downtown Seattle. She was 25, effortlessly elegant in a way that only comes from old money. Her blonde hair was always perfectly styled, and her designer outfits looked casual, but probably cost more than my monthly salary at the time. She worked as an event coordinator for her father's company, planning corporate parties and donor events. I was 28, fresh off a successful turnaround of a manufacturing plant in Oregon, and hungry for my next challenge. When Gerald approached me at that gala and started talking about his company's problems, I saw an opportunity. And when Claire smiled at me across the champagne fountain, I saw something else entirely. We dated for 8 months before I proposed. Gerald was thrilled. He'd been searching for someone to save his company. And here I was, young, ambitious, and with a proven track record of turning businesses around. The fact that I was marrying his only child was just the cherry on top. Our wedding was a fairy tale. Claire got everything she'd ever dreamed of. 300 guests at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, an orchestra, flowers flown in from Holland, and a honeymoon in Bora Bora that cost more than my first car. Gerald spared no expense for his princess. 2 weeks after we returned from our honeymoon, Gerald made me operations director with a clear path to CEO. Within 3 years, I was running the entire company. Gerald stepped back into an advisory role, spending most of his time on the golf course, while I rebuilt his business from the ground up. The first 5 years were brutal. I worked 80-hour weeks restructuring departments, renegotiating supplier contracts, and implementing new quality control systems. I had to make tough decisions, like letting go of 40% of the workforce, not because I wanted to, but because the company couldn't survive with the dead weight. Every decision I made was met with resistance, but the numbers didn't lie. Year 1, we stopped the bleeding. Year 2, we broke even. By year 3, we turned a profit. By year 5, Marlowe Industries was bringing in $22 million in annual revenue, and I had started expanding into new markets. Claire seemed proud of me. She loved telling her friends about her husband, the CEO, and the company's growth. We bought a house in Medina with a view of Lake Washington, the kind of place that felt like a dream. We vacationed in Europe, drove luxury cars, and donated to all the right charities. Gerald treated me like the son he never had. At every board meeting, he'd clap me on the shoulder and tell everyone how lucky he was to have found me. But looking back now, I see the signs I missed. The way Claire would get distant whenever I talked about work. The way she changed the subject when I mentioned expansion plans. The times her phone would buzz at dinner, and she'd excuse herself to answer it, always with the same excuse about a vendor emergency or a client crisis. I was too focused on building the business to notice my marriage was crumbling. Too obsessed with hitting revenue targets to see that Claire was spending less time at home and more time on business trips that never quite made sense. By year 10, Marlowe Industries was doing $58 million in annual revenue. I had negotiated contracts with 3 major automotive manufacturers, expanded into aerospace components, and opened a second facility in Texas. Industry publications were writing about our success story. Gerald was being invited to speak at conferences about family business transitions. I thought I was securing our future. Turns out, I was just making myself obsolete. If you're still with me, hit that like button and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think loyalty in family businesses is a myth? And if you're curious about what happens next, make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, the story is just getting started. The warning signs started appearing about 6 months ago, though I didn't recognize them at the time. Claire began mentioning an old college friend, Ryan Bennett, who had recently moved back to Seattle. She'd bring him up casually during dinner conversations, talking about how successful he'd been in venture capital, how charming he was, and how Gerald had run into him at the country club. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then Ryan started showing up at family functions. First, it was Gerald's birthday party. Then, Sunday dinners at the Whitman estate. He was smooth, I'll give him that. Tall, fit, with that effortless confidence that comes from never having to struggle for anything. He wore tailored suits, drove a Porsche, and had a way of making everyone in the room feel like they were the most important person there. Gerald adored him. They'd spend hours talking about business trends, market opportunities, and investment strategies. Ryan would praise Gerald's engineering legacy and suggest ways to take Marlowe Industries to the next level. Meanwhile, I sat there, feeling like a third wheel in my own life. Claire started working late more often. She'd come home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine, brushing off my questions with vague excuses about client dinners. When I asked which clients, she'd get defensive, accusing me of being controlling and paranoid. I wasn't paranoid. I was observant. And what I observed was my wife slowly pulling away from me while getting closer to Ryan Bennett. 3 months ago, Gerald called me into his office for what he called a family discussion. When I arrived, Ryan was already there, sitting in the chair I usually occupied during these meetings. "Ethan," Gerald began, gesturing for me to sit. "I wanted to talk to you about the future of Marlowe Industries. We've had an incredible run, and you've done amazing work transforming this company. But I think it's time we started thinking about the next phase." I nodded, assuming he was referring to the expansion plans we'd been discussing. The new facility in Ohio, the potential acquisition in Michigan. "Ryan's been consulting with me on some strategic planning," Gerald continued. "He's got some innovative ideas about taking the company public, attracting venture capital, and scaling up in ways we haven't considered." I glanced at Ryan, who smiled back with perfect white teeth. "Ethan, your operational expertise has been invaluable," Ryan said in that smooth, practiced voice of his. "But growth at this level requires a different skill set. Financial engineering, investor relations, market positioning. That's my specialty." "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. Gerald cleared his throat. "We're considering bringing Ryan on board as a strategic advisor, someone who can help guide us through the next growth phase. You'd still be CEO, of course, but Ryan would work closely with both of us on high-level strategy." It sounded reasonable. It sounded like a smart business move. It sounded like the beginning of the end. Over the next 3 months, Ryan's role expanded. He started attending executive meetings, weighing in on decisions that used to be mine alone. He'd override my recommendations, citing market research I'd never seen. He'd schedule meetings with key clients without including me, then report back to Gerald about how well they went. And through it all, Claire supported him. She'd defend his ideas at dinner, criticize my resistance to change, and suggest that maybe I was threatened by someone younger and more innovative. I wasn't threatened. I was watching a coup unfold in slow motion. The real betrayal came 2 weeks ago at a family dinner at the Whitman estate. It was supposed to be a celebration. Marlowe Industries had just closed its best quarter ever, hitting $85 million in annual revenue. I had worked for 13 years to get us here, and Gerald insisted on a family dinner to mark the occasion. I should have known something was wrong when I arrived and saw Ryan's Porsche in the driveway. He wasn't family. He wasn't even officially an employee yet. But there he was, sitting at the dining table like he belonged there. Gerald raised his champagne glass once we were all seated. To Ethan, he said, "For 13 years of dedicated service to Marlowe Industries." You've taken my company further than I ever dreamed possible." Everyone clinked glasses. I smiled, feeling proud despite the unease in my chest. "And now," Gerald continued, his smile widening, "it's time to talk about the future. Claire, why don't you share our news?" Claire looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Ethan," she began, her voice steady and rehearsed, "we wanted you to hear this from us first. Ryan and I have been seeing each other for the past 6 months. We're in love, and we're getting married." The room tilted. I gripped my champagne glass so tightly I was surprised it didn't shatter. "I know this comes as a shock," Claire continued, her tone calm and practiced. "But Ryan and I realized we're better suited for each other. You're a great man, Ethan, but you're married to your work. Ryan understands me in ways you never did." I looked at Gerald, waiting for him to object, to defend me, to show some loyalty after 13 years of transforming his company. Instead, he nodded sympathetically. "These things happen, son," Gerald said. "Claire's happiness is what matters most. And the good news is we've worked out a very fair arrangement for everyone involved." Ryan leaned forward, his smile never faltering. "Ethan, you've built an incredible foundation at Marlowe Industries, but Claire and I feel it's best if we make a clean break. I'll be taking over as CEO effective next month. Gerald and I have already worked out the details." My brain struggled to process what I was hearing. Gerald had given my job, the job I'd held for a decade, the job I'd used to save his failing company, to the man who was stealing my wife. "You're firing me," I said quietly. "Not firing," Gerald corrected. "We're buying out your contract. Very generously, I might add. You'll receive 2 years' salary as severance, full benefits through the end of the year, and a glowing recommendation letter. You'll land on your feet, Ethan. You're talented." Claire reached across the table, but I pulled my hand away. "Ethan, please understand," she said, her voice soft and pleading. "This isn't personal. We just think it's best for everyone if we make a clean break. You can't expect to keep working at Marlowe Industries while Ryan and I are married. It would be too awkward." I looked around the table at these people I had considered family. Gerald, who I had made into a millionaire many times over. Claire, who I had loved and supported for 13 years. Ryan, who had slithered into my life like a snake and stolen everything I had built. And then I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had just realized he'd been playing chess while everyone else had been playing checkers. The smile of someone who understood that the game wasn't over yet. "Congratulations," I said calmly. "I hope you'll both be very happy together." The relief on their faces was almost comical. They had expected anger, maybe threats or tears. Instead, I was agreeing with them, making it easy. "You're taking this remarkably well," Gerald said, clearly surprised. "What's the point of making a scene?" I replied, "Claire's right. If she's happier with Ryan, then that's what matters. And Ryan, I'm sure you'll do great things with Marlowe Industries. You've got a solid foundation to build on." I raised my glass. To new beginnings for everyone. We clinked glasses again, but this time the atmosphere was different. They had prepared for a fight, and I had given them surrender, but they had no idea what was coming. That night, I didn't go home. I drove straight to my office at Marlowe Industries, swiped my access card, still valid for another month, and went to my private server. For 13 years, I had been building this company. And for 13 years, I had been documenting everything. Every contract I negotiated had a personal copy saved. Every proprietary process I developed belonged to me, not the company. Every key client relationship I built was based on personal trust, not corporate loyalty. And most importantly, every single innovation that had taken Marlowe Industries from $12 million to $85 million had been registered under my name at the patent office, not the company's. You see, I learned something early in my career. When you work for a family business, you're never really family. You're an employee, disposable the moment you become inconvenient. So, I protected myself. The patents alone were worth millions. The manufacturing processes I developed, the quality control systems, the supply chain innovations, all mine. Gerald had been so focused on quarterly earnings that he never paid attention to the intellectual property I was accumulating. And then there were the clients. 3 major automotive manufacturers, 2 aerospace companies, and a dozen industrial equipment producers. They all had contracts with Marlowe Industries, but those contracts had been negotiated by me personally. The purchasing managers knew my name, trusted my word, and had my personal cell phone number. I spent the entire night copying files, securing patents, and drafting a business plan. By sunrise, I had everything I needed. The next morning, I walked into Marlowe Industries like nothing had changed. Ryan was already in what used to be my office, rearranging furniture and taking calls. I knocked politely on the doorframe. "Morning, Ryan. Just wanted to say no hard feelings about everything. I know you'll take good care of the company." He looked surprised but pleased. "Thanks, Ethan. That means a lot. I was worried there might be some awkwardness." "Not at all," I said with a smile. "In fact, I wanted to give you a heads up on something. I've got a meeting with Harrison Automotive this afternoon. They're one of our biggest clients. Annual contract worth about $18 million. I figured I should handle the transition, personally, introduce you, make sure they're comfortable with the leadership change." Ryan's eyes lit up. "That would be great. Really professional of you." I smiled again. "Just want to make sure everyone lands on their feet." The meeting with Harrison Automotive lasted exactly 45 minutes. I introduced Ryan as the incoming CEO, praised his vision and strategy, and then quietly mentioned that I'd be starting my own manufacturing firm next month, and that I'd love to continue working with them in my new venture. The Harrison team didn't even hesitate. "Ethan, we've worked with you for 8 years, the purchasing director said. "You're the reason we chose Marlowe Industries in the first place. If you're starting your own company, you'll have our business." Ryan's face went pale. "But our contract," he started. "Our contract is with Marlowe Industries," the director interrupted, "and it expires in 2 months. We're not renewing. We'll be moving our business to Ethan's new firm." One down. Over the next week, I had similar conversations with every major client. The aerospace companies, the industrial equipment manufacturers, even the smaller accounts that had grown with us over the years. The message was always the same. Marlowe Industries had been successful because of me, and they were following me wherever I went. Ryan tried to stop it. He called emergency meetings, offered discounts, even had Gerald personally reach out to some clients. But the damage was done. Within 10 days, Marlowe Industries had lost 73% of its client base. But I wasn't finished. Remember those patents I mentioned? Turns out the core manufacturing processes that made Marlowe Industries competitive were all registered under my name. The quality control systems, the efficiency protocols, even the proprietary alloy mixtures we used for certain components, all mine. I filed paperwork with the patent office, officially revoking Marlowe Industries' license to use my intellectual property effective immediately. Gerald called me furious. "You can't do this, Ethan. You'll destroy the company." "I can and I am," I replied calmly. "Those patents are mine. I developed them. I registered them. I own them. If Marlowe Industries wants to continue using them, they'll need to license them for me. $2 million per year should be fair." "That's extortion," he shouted. "That's business, Gerald. You taught me that." Claire tried next, calling me in tears. "Ethan, please. You're being vindictive. This is my father's legacy you're destroying." "Your father's legacy?" I laughed bitterly. "Claire, your father's company was worth $12 million when I married you. I built it into an $85 million enterprise using my skills, my innovations, and my relationships. The only thing Gerald contributed was his name on the door." "But we're family," she sobbed. "No, Claire, we're not. We were married, but I was never family. That became clear when you traded me in for a newer model, and your father handed over my job without a second thought." Her voice broke. "I made a mistake, Ethan. Please don't do this. You made your choice, Claire. Now you're living with the consequences." If you're still here, let me know in the comments. What would you have done in Ethan's place? Would you have walked away, or would you have fought back? And if you've ever been betrayed like this, share your story. I'd love to hear it. The final blow came from an unexpected source. Sarah Mitchell, my second-in-command at Marlowe Industries, called me 3 days after my meeting with Harrison Automotive. Sarah had been with the company for over a decade. I had promoted her from floor manager to COO because she was sharp, loyal, and knew the business inside and out. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "I'm putting in my notice at Marlowe Industries. So are David, Jennifer, and Marcus from the management team. We'd like to know if you're hiring." I couldn't help but smile. "Send me your resumes," I said. "I'm going to need good people." By the end of the month, I had recruited 12 of Marlowe Industries' top managers and engineers, the people who actually knew how to run the operation. The ones who had been loyal to me, not the Whitman name. My new company, Marlowe Precision, opened its doors 6 weeks after that disastrous family dinner. I secured a facility in Kent, leased equipment, and had contracts from 85% of my former client base before we even started production. Meanwhile, Marlowe Industries was in freefall. Without clients, without the patents that made them competitive, and without anyone who knew how to actually run a manufacturing operation, Ryan was drowning. The company that had been worth $85 million was now barely worth $20 million, and dropping fast. Gerald tried to salvage things. He came to my new office, hat in hand, looking 20 years older than he had at that dinner. "Ethan," he said quietly, his voice stripped of its usual bravado, "I made a mistake. We all did. What can I do to make this right?" I looked at the man who had once clapped me on the shoulder and called me the son he never had. The man who had handed me his daughter and his company, only to take them both away when something shinier came along. "You can't make it right, Gerald," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You had 13 years to treat me like family. Instead, you treated me like an employee, someone you could dispose of when it was convenient. Now you're dealing with the consequences." "But the company," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "My legacy." "Your legacy is gone, Gerald," I interrupted, my tone sharp. "You gave it away the night you chose Ryan over the man who actually built it. Marlowe Industries will be bankrupt within 6 months. The building and equipment will be sold to pay creditors, and Ryan will move on to his next venture capital opportunity, leaving you with nothing but memories of what could have been." "Please, Ethan," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "There must be something." I leaned back in my chair, the same way Gerald used to lean back in his. "Actually, there is one thing. I'd be willing to buy Marlowe Industries' remaining assets. The building, the equipment, the Whitman name. I'll give you $8 million for it. That's more than it's worth now, but I'm feeling generous." $8 million. Gerald's face turned red, his hands trembling. "The company's worth." "It's worth nothing," I said, cutting him off. "Not without clients, patents, or competent management. $8 million, Gerald. Take it or leave it." He took it. What choice did he have? 3 months later, Marlowe Precision absorbed what was left of Marlowe Industries. I kept the building as a second facility, sold off the outdated equipment, and retired the Whitman name permanently. Gerald's legacy, the company his grandfather had founded 70 years ago, ceased to exist. As for Claire and Ryan, their engagement lasted about as long as Marlowe Industries did. Turns out Ryan was only interested in Claire when she came with a successful company and a rich father. Once both were gone, so was he. Last I heard, Ryan had moved to California and was working as a consultant for tech startups. Claire tried to reach out once, a few months after everything fell apart. She showed up at my new office, no longer wearing designer clothes, her hair unkempt, her eyes tired and sad. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling, "I made a terrible mistake. Can we talk?" I looked at the woman I had loved for 13 years. The woman who had stood by while her father gave away my job to her boyfriend. The woman who had chosen excitement over loyalty. "There's nothing to talk about, Claire," I said, my voice cold. "You made your choice. I'm just living with the consequences of your decision." "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I was stupid. Ryan seemed exciting, but he wasn't you. You were the one who really cared about me, about the company, about building something lasting. You're right, I said, my tone unyielding. I did care. For 13 years, I cared about you and your father more than I cared about protecting myself. That was my mistake, but I learned from it. So that's it, she asked, her voice breaking. We're just done. We've been done since the night you announced your engagement to another man at a dinner that was supposed to celebrate my success, I said, my words cutting like a blade. I'm just the only one who kept playing the game. She left, and I haven't heard from her since. Today, Marlowe Precision does $95 million in annual revenue. We've expanded into 3 states, employ 240 people, and I own 100% of the company. No partners, no investors, no family members who can take it away. I wake up every morning in a house I design myself. No Claire, no in-laws, no fake family dinners where people pretend to care while secretly plotting betrayal. Just me, my business, and the team I've built. Sometimes people ask if I feel guilty about destroying Gerald's legacy. The answer is simple, no. Gerald destroyed his own legacy the moment he chose Ryan over the man who had actually saved his company. I just made sure the consequences matched the betrayal. Last month, I ran into Gerald at a coffee shop downtown. He was sitting alone, hunched over a cup of black coffee, looking small and defeated. His once proud shoulders were slumped, and the spark of confidence that used to light up his eyes was gone. He looked up when I walked in, and for a moment I thought he might say something. But I just nodded politely and walked past. Some people deserve closure. Gerald Whitman wasn't one of them. As for Claire, I haven't seen or heard from her since that day in my office. I imagine she's still trying to piece her life back together, but I don't spend much time thinking about it. She made her choice, and I made mine. The lesson I learned from all of this is simple. In business and in family, loyalty is everything. But loyalty has to go both ways. When someone shows you they value you only for what you can provide, believe them. And protect yourself accordingly. I spent 13 years building someone else's dream, thinking I was building a family. When they discarded me, I took everything I had built and made it mine. Now I'm building my own dream, my own legacy, with people who earned their place through loyalty, not blood. Gerald thought he could take my work and give it to someone else. Claire thought she could replace me without consequence. Ryan thought he could charm his way into an empire someone else had built. They were all wrong. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something so successful that they have to watch you thrive while they fail. It's taking everything they thought was theirs and proving it was always yours. It's smiling and wishing them well while you systematically dismantle their world. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my shoes? And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. I'm Ethan Marlowe. I spent 13 years making someone else rich. Then they tried to throw me away. Now, I'm richer than they ever dreamed, and they're left with nothing but regrets and the slowly dawning understanding that they bet on the wrong man. The company they thought was theirs was always mine. They just didn't realize it until it was too late.